say that or even thought about that yourself. Maybe in a conversation about the future of our planet, you've heard someone say, "It's okay, Elon Musk will take us to Mars with SpaceX." To quote American geographer Jared Diamond, author of the book Collapse, How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed, underlying this expression of faith is the implicit assumption that from tomorrow onwards, technology will function primarily to solve existing problems and will cease to create new ones. He argues all our current problems are unintended negative consequences of our existing technology. Now, although this might be quite a strong argument, an outlier, if you will, I want you to take a moment to think about it. Take a look at this graph of the Earth's change in temperature over the past few decades from our world and data. After the Industrial Revolution at around 1850, annual temperatures have begun to rise, showing a direct correlation between technology and climate change. Now, I'm not completely against technology. Trust me, I'm an iPad kid myself. Technology has helped us significantly improve quality of life, increasing life expectancies, our capacity to cure many diseases we couldn't before, and it does show promises in environmental cleanup. But ultimately, technology is a double-edged sword. It is capable of undoing and doing damage to the environment. Now, I'm not going to go on and on about the ways technology has contributed to climate change, although I could, we already know that. We already know we are in the middle of a global environmental crisis and we need to do something about it. In this presentation, I'm going to be exploring 3 limitations of technology as a solution to the global environmental crisis. This includes the time it takes technology to reach the market, the uncleanliness of clean energy, and the ways technology disassociates humans from the consequences of their actions. The purpose of my talk, as an outlier, is to get you to reconsider the role technology will play in solving our biggest challenges, and to get you to consider how you, as an individual, might provide more effective solutions in the way you live your life. First, the time to market problem. Let me remind you again of my good friend Jared Diamond. Diamond says that although some technologies succeed, most do not. And those that do succeed typically take a few decades to develop. At the rate our environment is warming, we simply do not have a few decades to spare. Although it seems like technology is emerging more rapidly than ever, Diamond provides examples such as gas heating, electric lighting, and electric cars that all took decades to make. Let's dig into one of these examples, electric cars. Although the technology to create electric cars began in the 1800s, in 2000, Toyota Prius became the first hybrid electric vehicle to be sold worldwide. So even though the technology existed, it still took years for the car to actually reach the market. And even though electric vehicles are currently in the market, they're still the minority. Brands say they hope to completely phase out the combustion engine by 2035 and hope to be carbon neutral by 2040. Like I said before, we simply cannot afford to wait 17 years at our current rate of consumption. And although this is ultimately a success story, the time it has taken electric vehicles to reach the market proves this low-carbon technical solution to be unreliable. The reality is that it's hard to get technology out to the market. According to the Harvard Business Review, this is because of many challenges that entrepreneurs face, such as finding investors, patents, capital, and more. Energy Policy, an international peer-reviewed journal addressing the policy implications of energy supply and use, explains that invention of technology to widespread commercialization is a multi-decadal process. If you've ever wondered why we don't use more renewable sources of energy, even though they exist, it's because even making the switch from one source of energy to another takes significant amounts of time. Installing new energy sources is a costly exercise, and the fact remains that fossil fuels are cheaper, more reliable, and energy abundant. Some believe that nuclear power plants are the answer because they produce no greenhouse gases during operation. However, that argument is flawed for 2 reasons. Firstly, nuclear power plants take a long time to get up and running, over 5 years according to the World Nuclear Association, proving the time to market problem to be a challenge yet again. But second, nuclear power plants aren't actually carbon neutral. In fact, no energy is carbon zero, which brings me to my next point about the uncleanliness of clean energy. The phrase clean energy has such a positive connotation to it. When we hear those words, it makes us happy and we think of sunshine, fresh wind, and generally innocent images. The reality is that no energy is innocent and that only truly clean energy is no energy at all. And we can observe this opinion scientifically through the second law of thermodynamics, which explains why many remediation activities result in greater environmental impact. The second law states in simple terms that entropy, the amount of energy that is unavailable to do work, always increases. When we use energy, losses will inevitably occur, and greater entropy results in greater losses, waste, and ultimately environmental impact. For example, as wood burns, its energy is spread as heat, but also as smoke. This is an example of increasing entropy and exemplifies the second law. Turning fuel into smoke and heat is easy, but turning heat and smoke back into fuel is difficult to envision. The way we use power follows the natural direction from order to disorder. We burn fuel to create energy, but doing the reverse, taking heat and combustion byproducts to make fuel, not only requires energy, but requires more energy than was used in the first place. Therefore, as shown in this diagram, reversing a process or increasing order takes more work. So reversing environmental impacts takes more energy. To provide an example by research engineer Michael Huseman on his analysis of climate technology, environmental remediation for cleaning groundwater contaminants is known as pump and treat technology. There are more than 250,000 leaking underground storage tanks in the US, which pose as a health risk to water users. So technology was invented to reverse the dispersion of these groundwater contaminants. During pump and treat, the contaminated groundwater is pumped out of the ground, the contaminants are removed, and then the clean groundwater is re-injected, as shown in this diagram. However, the machine used to do this uses a diesel engine. And according to the second law, the increase in entropy due to the combustion of diesel is greater than the reduction due to the removal of groundwater contaminants. Therefore, limited groundwater cleanup is carried out at the expense of greater atmospheric pollution of CO2, which contributes towards global warming. From an entropic point of view, avoiding greenhouse gases in the first place is cheaper and less energy intensive than trying to scrub the atmosphere after the fact. Going back to the previous example of electric cars, we charge these cars off of the same power grid that you and I use every day, which is most often natural gas or fossil fuels. And this is the perfect example of how renewable energy or sustainable innovations aren't living up to their promises. Currently, forms of renewable energy are being given the gold star in climate action. But how can renewable energy be renewable when it uses non-renewable resources? Not only will this not reverse climate change, but it will worsen it. Let me provide some examples from foreign policy. Extraction of neodymium, an element that is essential to wind turbines, will need to rise by nearly 35% over current levels. The same is true for silver, which is critical to solar panels. Silver extraction will need to rise by 38% and could reach as high as 105%. Demand for indium, also essential to solar technology, will more than triple and could end up skyrocketing by 920%. And these are only a handful of the elements and minerals that go into renewable energy sources. And what about when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing? Well, we have to use batteries. This means 40 million tons of lithium, an eye-watering 2,700% increase over current levels of extraction. Table 2.2 shows the breakdown of minerals needed for solar technology, and Table 2.3 shows the breakdown of significant metal content in batteries from the World Bank Group. The fact that non-renewable resources are being depleted to create renewable energy sources seems contradictory. To make matters worse, mining has become one of the biggest industries contributing towards deforestation, ecosystem collapse, and biodiversity loss. So why would we want to expand it? And this is just to power the current global economy. But what about when we start to account for greater economic growth and increased population? These numbers will surely increase. Plus, all renewable energy is still susceptible to needing to be replaced. A wind turbine has a lifespan of 15 to 20 years and a solar panel of 20 to 30 years, with an average efficiency of 15 to 20%. Plus, these sources of renewable energy simply do not have the capacity to replace fossil fuels. Bill Reese, a population ecologist and ecological economist, explains that in order to replace only 50% of global fossil fuels by 2030 with electricity, we would need to build 1.2 times the current global stock of all wind farms and solar panels every year for the next 9 years. Plus, building these wind farms and solar panels are only contributing to global warming due to the significant biodiversity loss they are causing. If we continue to consume, it doesn't matter what kind of energy, we will continue to burst through the seams of our planetary boundaries, as shown in this image. The dominant conversation right now is that we can turn to technology to help with our issues, and the marketing of this makes it look very promising. But what we don't see is the transition from dirty to clean, the materials decomposing after the end of life for these rare earth minerals, and what to do when wind turbines stop working. What we need is lifestyle changes and population policies that are enforced. But this is unlikely to happen as I reach my final point, the disassociation to humans. As humans, we optimistically yet ignorantly put our faith into new technology. Research from Lancaster Environment Center says that for 40 years, environmental action has been delayed by technological promises. Let me bring you back again to my good friend Jared Diamond, who explains some of the reasons why societies make bad decisions. First, failure to anticipate. Humans and governments in particular are too busy dealing with other problems to put climate action at the forefront, which is what we need. Think about the Paris Agreement. Countries, including Canada, are simply not following through with their promises. Second, failure to perceive. Some problems cannot be observed by the human eye, and others take very long before they even become realized. It's not like every time we get into a car, the climate becomes 0.001 degrees warmer, but rather an accumulation over time that has resulted in the warming of our planet. Going back to my example of groundwater contaminants, humans can't see the damage that the air pollution is causing in that moment from the combustion of diesel. They are only seeing the groundwater contaminants that are being removed. Eventually, as we continue outside our planetary boundaries, we will reach the breaking point. Finally, and my personal favorite, rational bad behavior. This is all about selfishness and humans having a short-term versus a long-term stake. Evidence from MIT professor David Rand suggests that, in general, humans have an innate desire to cooperate. However, it is only when we are given the opportunities to be strategically selfish that we reveal our more undesirable tendencies. Humans that simply won't be around in 50, 100, or 150 years will continue to contribute towards climate change because they will not see the effects. Humans don't want to perform the most logical and straightforward solution, which would be decreased consumption, because we don't want to do that to ourselves. We are addicted to fossil fuels, and we want to keep consuming, so we use technology as a way to disassociate ourselves from the problem. We want to continue to create art, music, play sports, travel the world, and many more. And this is why you might hear someone say technology will solve all our problems. But I hope I have explained to you why technology won't solve all our problems. So the next time you hear someone say this, I encourage you to bring in some healthy skepticism. I encourage you to question them on the ways technology can and cannot help solve our problems, and what other actions might be taken either alongside or instead of this reliance. I hope you will explain the limitations to that argument, and when you do, don't be surprised if you experience some pushback. Speaking from experience, I've been called a pessimist many times, and it's because it's natural for the points I discussed today to not sit right with people since they reveal the scary truth. We are bombarded by data projections and misleading positive news headlines that only increase our faith in technology. The truth about the future of our planet is not talked about enough. The truth in this scenario is the outlier. But as we know from statistics, outliers can have a huge impact on our data, so I encourage you to get comfortable being the outlier. Challenge the often praised scientific innovation because it's the only way we'll begin to see impactful change. To end on a note from Diamond, of course, the conclusion that the public has the ultimate responsibility of the behavior of even the biggest businesses is empowering and hopeful, rather than disappointing. Thank you.